better to do.
Welcome back to this hardcore version of a fireside chat. If this is your first time, glad to have you. If you are a loyal listener, welcome back. Some high fives to you. My name is Sean. I run Another City Records, and next to me virtually is my pal Rich, as always. And our guest tonight is my friend Kat. She is the co-host of Double Dare Ya podcast, a former intern at Bridge 9 Records, originally from the Chicagoland area, very important, and the vocalist for one of my daughter's top 5 favorite bands, FAIM.
Yes.
Let me
Welcome to the show.
Let me just say, if you ain't from the Lake Michigan area, you ain't shit.
True. So true. Hi, everyone.
So I think you have seen my daughter mosh to the band.
That's why I do it. That's the reason why I do it, is right there.
Yeah, I've told the story.
Helping young kids get into hardcore in the right ways, for sure.
Yeah, I can't figure it out. Like, she just loves it. She doesn't see it as angry music, and her favorite band is Sick of It All. And I've told the story here before, so Rich has heard it a couple times. But Sick of It All, everybody in the band sent her a birthday video for her 6th birthday.
Yeah,
and pig and shit, absolute pig and shit.
Have you played her Straight Ahead or Rest in Pieces yet? Has she become familiar with the pre-Sick of It All bands?
She has not. I mean, she's 6, so I just dip her toes into things at this point.
That's
right.
I think the first thing I have to say is I was unaware of this until just getting ready for the podcast. How do you feel that there's a not good band called the FAIM that spells their name the same way as you guys spell your band?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, they're really bad. I think they're from Australia or something. We were definitely aware of that band when we settled on the name and just didn't care. I haven't run into too much yet of people mixing us up, thankfully. But I mean, it's better that we're similar to a band that sucks than a band that is better than us, I guess, right?
You know, or if your band was like, oh, we settled on the name One Life Crew, and then you're just like,
right. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Yeah. We settled on the name Kid Rock. You know.
Yeah, we settled on Ted Nugent Kid Rock as a perfect band.
For sure.
It's funny you say Kid Rock. I just saw this meme today. It said like you need to wear a spacesuit when you're on the moon, and it said America, and it has this picture of Kid Rock just in like shorts and no shirt, stomping with his arms flailing behind him. I was like, that sums it up right there.
Yep. I've seen that photo made into a lot of really great memes. Yeah.
So, Kat, welcome to the show. How are you?
It's been a rough 5 weeks for me, but I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I mean, you know, I don't want to spill your business, but if you want to tell everyone what's going on, I think we have all been in the position that you've been in. So.
Yeah. I lost my dog, my first and only dog, Holden, who was the most amazing blind chocolate lab that I have for 9 years, on February 1st. And then on March 2nd, I lost my cat, Holly Hawks, named after the Saves the Day song. Yes. I got her 19 and a half years ago. And they both, just decided to go at the same time. And so now we are a petless house, and it's really hard. And I actually just had therapy before this. And one of the things she said to me was, she's like, your cat, Holly, was like the longest consistent companion you've had. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like, I haven't been that consistently close to any other living thing like I have Holly, because like obviously I have my family, but I moved when I was 18 and we just moved back near each other. So we spent like 20 years away from each other. And of course I have friends, but I have also moved around a lot. So I haven't lived in one place for a very long time. And so Holly is like, she was my best friend. And she really was, because she was the only one who was there for me, like physically and emotionally, for 19 and a half years. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's crazy how you can bond with your pets so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up on a farm, so I mean, I've had animals my whole life. But I
Yeah.
had this little dog. His name was Cornholio, and he was a little 11-pound Boston Terrier.
Oh.
He was funny. He was well known in the Pennsylvania hardcore scene because I bring him to shows
Oh
sometimes.
my gosh.
And bands coming through would always love him because he
Oh.
was just such like so much personality. And I had him like he stayed with my dad when I moved out to Pennsylvania, and then at some point I brought him out with me, and he was just my companion through everything, through thick and thin of
Yeah.
life. And then he had a brain tumor and knew sort of the end was near, but woke up on a Sunday morning at like 5 a.m. having a seizure, and that was time. And it's you never get over it. I mean, he
Yeah.
died geez like in like 2006 or so. And I still have his little face tattooed on me, and
Yes.
so it's just like they're part of your life, and
Yeah.
they're there for all of these moments, and don't judge you, don't they're just there through thick and thin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that's helped me, because I've been in that situation a few years ago myself. But my friend Pat, who's in Self-Defense Family, when Self-Defense Family was end of the year, they had a song where he had a lyric that said, "We don't own each other, we just own a time." And that's like, I don't know, that I thought that was really nice way to put it.
That is. That is, yeah. So yeah, but I'm doing all right. I hate to say I'm seeing like some of the positives of not having pets, like the freedom to do whatever I want, and like saving like several $100s a month on not buying food and medicine and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like ready already to get another, probably start with a cat. My partner Joey, though, he's a little more hesitant. He'd like to wait till the summer at least, which I understand. He was also not a cat person when we met. And at the time we met, I had 3 cats and a dog. And he told me, like, on our first date, he was like, "I don't really like cats." And I was like, "Oh, this might not work at all." And he just fell in love with my cats because they were the best cats in the world, and they had these amazing personalities. And so yeah, he's not as apt to, cats as I am, which I'm sure once we get one, he would fall in love with it like he did the other 3. But so yeah, just it's quiet in the house right now. But I'm doing okay. I'm busy with work, so it takes up a lot of my time. So
yeah, a couple years ago we had I had a dog that was mine when I was married previously, and then made it through the divorce, wound up with my current wife and I, and we had we had 2 dogs. We had Wrigley and Addison. Addison was a little 3-legged pit bull, and she became so protective when my daughter was born. And I remember she wouldn't let people in the room, and then Wrigley, like, he was like the doggiest dog ever. Like, just like Addison was like a people dog, and Wrigley was like a doggy dog. And she just walked in there, and Addison like went after him for being in the room with the baby. And so
Wow.
he snuck in there when she wasn't looking and just took a giant dump. But he died a couple years ago, and we were like, you know what, let's regroup and kind of take a while, and it's first time without a dog in the house for a while, and like let's enjoy some of the freedom and kind of figure out what we want to do. And my daughter was like a couple weeks later is like, I miss Wrigley, can we get another dog? And we're like, okay. And then literally we went on Pet Finder to look at adoptions, and the first dog we saw was this like all gray pit bull named Princess Pickle.
Oh my God, that's the best name ever.
And so we immediately called on Princess Pickle, didn't consult with my wife. I'm like, it's Princess Pickle. And they were like, she just got adopted. I'm like, oh. So we ended up finding a dog locally, and I asked my daughter, I was like, what do you want to name her? She was like 3 at the time, and she was like, Princess Lala. What's plan B? She's like, Biscuit. All right, Biscuit it is. We'll go with Biscuit.
I would have gone with Princess Lala for sure. That's great.
So I'm a product of country bumpkin public school. So I had been calling the band FAIM for a while, and then I was like, FAIM, and I was like, my Midwest mind was broken, and I was like, well, that makes sense, but I'm like, how did I not know that? And so I felt completely stupid. So apologies up front.
You shouldn't apologize. It's a super pretentious name because it's French for hunger, and we didn't want to name our band Hunger, so we started Googling hunger in other languages and settled on FAIM, and never thought we would actually play France, and then we did, and we were like so scared to say our band name because we didn't want a bunch of French people making fun of us, but they're actually very nice and said that we were saying it correctly, which was great. But yeah, it's super pretentious. And so everybody said FAIM or FEM. And then it's slowly gotten out that it's pronounced FAM. I would easily change the name of this band if I could, but it's too late. So please don't apologize.
Yeah, Safe Inside's gonna start mailing stickers to put over the record cover
right?
of the new band name. Apologies, folks. Here's a new sticker. Just slap it on there. If it's so much new name on this album.
Yep.
So, not too long ago, you have your first full length album, Hollow Hope.
Yeah.
What were you expecting when that record came out? Were you expecting the kudos that you got?
Other people in our band might say yes. I am quite the negative Nancy, so I was shocked. I did not think we were gonna sell as many records as we did. I didn't think we were gonna make anybody's record lists, like I just didn't expect. Like when we were talking to Bert about the record, he was like, we're going to sell out of this immediately. And I was like, no, we're not. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like we're nobody. Like nobody likes this style of hardcore. Like we're just not what people are into right now. And he's like, no, trust me, like people really like it. And then it just did really well. And so it was pretty shocking for me. Like I'm very humbled by it and like very excited that people like it because I'm really proud of this record and like what it is and what it, like musically and lyrically, just so proud of it. And so yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that it did so well. I think it's hard that it came out in the middle of the pandemic and we haven't really been able to tour on it. So that's been a bummer. Like we can't wait to be able to to tour in 2022, I'm sure. Maybe the end of this year, we'll see what happens with all of these vaccines. Things are sounding really hopeful right now. And so yeah, I think we make a unique style of hardcore that like gets lost on a lot of people, which is like that's like not a put down of anybody. I think it's just I don't want to say that like our hardcore is like made for people who grew up in the mid 2000s in the hardcore scene, but it might be. Um, and a lot of what kids like these days, because we're all old, is not that style of hardcore. So, I'm excited that anybody likes it.
Yeah, I mean, the record is great. So I mean, to start there, but it's I think it came out at a good time where a lot of people were like, "Oh, do we release something?" Because
Yeah.
nobody, I don't think anybody was expecting us a year later to just be still parked in our houses.
Yeah.
So it was, people were postponing records, and it was pre people doing, COVID projects.
Right.
So it just hit that sweet spot, and was a really good record. Just, it was a perfect timing, honestly.
Thanks. Yeah. And I think it was also like the timing of it, partly the way we timed it. Like it was actually supposed to come out a couple months earlier than it did, but we just didn't. Part of it was the concern about like if people were going to lose jobs due to COVID, right? And like, would we be able to afford to put out the record? And then part of it was we just didn't want to put something out in like, it's supposed to come out in June, and we just didn't want to do that with everything that was also going on with all the BLM protests and stuff. Like we didn't want to take away from that or seem like we were trying to market it, if that makes sense. And so the record is very much like a protest record. Like the record is meant to be about how we are feeling in the face of desperation, like whether it be COVID or our mental health or, what's police violence or things like that. Like that's what the record is about. And so it felt very appropriate in that way to kind of come out in 2021, just with like how everybody was feeling about the state of the world. And so I think it coming out at the end of August was actually was good in that way.
So, I mean, I would lump you guys into political leaning bands, but not a political band. Would that be fair? I mean, as opposed to,
I mean, not every song we write, like not all the lyrics are political, but we do try to make we do try to use hardcore as a platform to talk about political issues. So I think we're more than political leaning. Like you won't see us play a show where we won't talk about something that needs to be talked about. If we could make every show that we played a benefit for something, we would, like that's like it's very much about like, how can we help young hardcore kids who might not be as in tune with what's happening politically, like just be aware of different things. That's very much what we do. Like that's at the forefront of why we do what we do as a band. And so I think like a lot of the lyrics being about mental health are also like that happened a lot because we are also very political people within our band. Like we do a lot of social justice type work. and that can wear on your mental health for sure,
Sure.
right? The fact that you are constantly trying to do things to make the world a better place for other people or animals or whatever, and you just see all of the wrong that's happening. It can really wear on you and and make you feel hopeless about what you're doing, but you don't want to give up, so you keep doing it. And so, yeah, so I do think we are a political band. We're not like propaganda or anti-flag where every song is a political song, but that's why we did start this band, was we felt like at the time there was a lack of politics in hardcore, and that was
Mhm.
like what drew all of us to hardcore, was the fact that like it was about how we could as a scene better society as a whole.
Well, let me ask you this: do you find from when you started going to shows, when you were young,
Yeah.
did you do you find that the kids now are uh, more left leaning than they were then, in your opinion? Or
Oh, that's such a good question. Um, how about I can say it depends.
sure.
Um, I felt like when I started going to shows when I was young, the majority of kids were left leaning, like they were
Hmm.
very punk, very political. But you did, like, growing up outside of Chicago, like I still remember how many like Nazis there were. Like I still
Hmm.
remember all of my friends who were sharps, like getting in fights with Nazis. Like that was like, I remember when like Rancid got beat up by Nazis after a show. Like, so those people, there were a lot of those people back then.
Yeah.
They still exist now. Like, especially like Denver had a huge like neo-Nazi group. I don't know what
Hmm.
it's like now because I'm not in Denver and I'm not really on social media much. I do think that, yeah, I mean, I think that like I I I think a lot of the younger kids in hardcore are much more political. Like there's
Hmm.
bands like Zulu and Move who
Yeah.
like are like really like that's like all, and Buggin, and like those are like the only bands like anybody should be listening to. Like I listened to the new Move today and I was like, why do I even make hardcore? Because this is all that matters. So I do think they are, but I do think there's like subsections of this hardcore scene that are still very conservative. I do
Oh,
think a
sure.
lot of them are older people.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
I won't name any names because I don't want to get blacklisted. Um, but there's definitely older people
Hmm.
who I think are more conservative. And I do think that there are like, I mean, I I'm gonna guess that there's probably kids in parts of the scene that very much just like want to mosh and don't care about politics.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I guess like yes and no. They're more left leaning now in certain parts of the scene, but I don't know every part of the scene to know. But maybe
Sure.
that's it. Maybe that's like I'm just like thinking while I'm talking. Maybe
It-
that's it. It's the fact that like the scene is more divided now than it was when I grew up.
okay. Well, in that actually, I'm sorry, Sean. I just gotta throw this in here real quick.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of piggybacking on that. From what I can see from my very limited view, when there are shows, I go to a few shows a year. I don't go to a ton,
Yeah.
because I like hanging out with my wife and my dog and all that.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
but like, there seems to be more. See that I don't see the divides, but also I kind of put myself in a bubble where mostly I just, I want to talk about commonalities anyways. But
Mhm.
like one thing I personally see, like, so with the fact that like MRR stopped being a publication,
Yeah.
and all of that, there seems to be, I don't know if you feel this way, but I kind of feel like there's less of a element of criticism. There's not really like, people aren't critiquing each other, which that's not always a bad thing. I mean, like it gets old if all you're doing is like someone's constantly telling you what you're doing wrong. But I kind of feel like there's much less like of that sort of critical thinking, and more just sort of like, well, we support this band, and kind of leaving it at that. And I don't know. I guess I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I see that, and I see more criticism. So I think that I see so I'll think about like Denver in particular. So like every kid goes to every show because they literally want to support any band and any local band. They're just like so excited about like punk and hardcore. At the same time, there are like multiple like scenes within Denver. Like there's like a more punk scene, and there's a scene that's like a little more artsy punk, and then there's like a hardcore scene, and then there's like a metalcore scene, and like sometimes they cross and sometimes they don't, and like nobody really like talks shit on each other. They're just like different groups of people. But I have to say, like, I think there's more critique now in the way of like of calling out people.
Okay, yeah, that's fair, definitely.
Yeah, but I think that like that is something that like I have my own thoughts on. I worry about us ostracizing people and not trying to figure out how they can repair the harm and help them become a better person. I have a big concern about that, because I think that all we do is create really bitter people who then go on to another scene and act the same way, or who end up like being ostracized and having no support system, or like I was saying this to somebody one day. It's amazing to me how many punks are against the prison system, but then they have no problem like ostracizing somebody from the hardcore scene. And I think that that's so hypocritical, because like you don't think people should be in jail for the crimes that they've committed because you think they should be given the ability to restore who they are, but you're not willing to do that within this scene. So I get what you mean. Yeah, I think that everybody really supports whatever.
I guess what I'm saying is there's less critical conversation.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. Like not saying you're wrong, you're this, but like a conversation, which is something that, in my opinion, MRR, for all of its faults, fostered very well.
Yeah.
Sorry, stepping on your feet, Sean.
Oh no! I was just jumping in. It's nuance that's missing. It's everything is with the polarization that we've kind of gotten to, not just in hardcore, but in general in life. It's everything's become black or white.
Yes,
and the critical thinking, I think, is a key term, and people aren't able to have a critical discussion with somebody with differing opinions. And that's where you sort of find, I mean, I like to say with my label, when I send out mail order, I put in the reading list. You may not agree with whatever the topic is. But I feel like understanding where people that have that line of thinking, where they're coming from, and why they think the way they are, or what, the situation, and understand the reasoning behind it, is that either emboldens your belief, well, I see that, but it makes me go, oh, X, Y, and Z, I still don't, understand or, back that opinion, but you opens your mind to it. I grew up on a small farm outside of Chicago, not exposed to anything. And
Yeah.
I moved to the city for college and was exposed to everything new from
Yeah.
people of different backgrounds, religious, cultural, ethnic, new music, new foods I'd never had.
Yeah. Yep.
I never had Chinese food. Never.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's fucking wild. Holy
Yeah. So it's like I never had falafel. I'd never had any
Yeah.
ethnic food except Italian.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's, just when you start, I'm like, all these preconceived notions I have, even if they're benign, you just we start questioning everything, and it's just learning. And so
Yes.
I just feel like that's been missing, is everybody's just so dug in to whatever they believe that they don't want to listen to what other
Yep.
people have to say.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that.
So when you guys are on tour and you're talking about messages that you have you had any maybe less than awesome responses to things you've said?
Yeah, you're the second person to ask me this. And, I think that, we play DIY shows, right? And so when we play DIY shows, I think DIY shows attract a certain type of person. And so we haven't really had anybody disagree with us on what we have to say, for the most part. I've had a couple of experiences of playing bigger shows where one definitely had like drunk German people like pretty much tell me they didn't want to hear what I have to say and they just wanted me to play music. But that was like a small amount of people out of a crowd of a very large crowd. So, and then another one, I had like some words to say about a certain person in the East Coast hardcore scene that has monopolized a hardcore scene and really has been a pretty terrible person when it comes to booking shows and booking bands and booking fests, and it's just not very diverse. And I had somebody who is it was a person, I'm sorry, I'm being very vague because I don't want to talk shit, because the last time I talked shit on a podcast, I got in trouble. So the somebody that was like an older person that I looked up to, like came up to me afterwards and was like, I don't think you should have said what you said about that person. They really helped me out by booking me on their fest, and I was like, well, that's really great for you, but I'm telling you from the perspective of a woman in the scene, I don't feel welcome in certain places because of this person. And so that is probably the most that I've dealt with, is like guys and even some girls, but guys in the scene trying to tell me how I should feel about certain people or certain situations. And mainly having to do with being a woman in the scene, which was really difficult, and it still is for many reasons. But most political issues, no, most people agree. It more so has to do with me being a woman and saying what I want to say as a woman. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's most people aren't able to pick out acts of misogyny, even casually, that
Yeah.
they just don't see it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the culture that we've built in
Yeah.
the time man has walked the earth.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Well, and in hardcore specifically, like social capital is king.
Oh
So
yeah.
like everybody, like people who don't need defending will always be the ones defended because they're usually the ones with the social capital.
Yep. God, that's so true. That's so true. Yeah. I was talking to somebody about so I was talking to somebody about there's a couple names I don't mind saying, so I'll say them. But I was talking to somebody about Jim Hesketh from Champion, who if people don't know, major sexual predator, has done plenty of inappropriate things. He tried to force himself on me once. And I was talking to somebody about him, and I was like, like, I just don't get why, like, there are men in this scene that are just allowed to be here and who are looked up to, who it's like known that they have, like, and I'm not saying Jim is one of these people. Jim definitely was like called out and like was given the option to like try to repair the harm, and he just hid instead. But like Sweet Pete is a person that I can bring up. Like Sweet Pete is known to date underage girls. He dated like a 16-year-old when he was like 40. And just the fact that like it was allowed, nobody said anything. It was brought up like many years later, talked about for a minute, nobody said anything. Like, and it was just like that's how it was. And I was talking to this person about it, and they're like, well, they like if that person, if somebody came out and like talked shit on Sweet Pete in the Boston scene, like they were gonna lose all their friends. Like they were like, that was social suicide. Like you were gonna be not part of Boston hardcore anymore. And just the thought that like it's like almost like mafia like, right? Like you can't, like you have to like show your loyalties to somebody who doesn't deserve it, or you're gonna like be ostracized from the scene. Like I find that stuff wild. Like just the fact that like in this scene we still have these older men, because they're mainly older men, who are just allowed to have done whatever they've done, have never done anything to like try and become a better human being. Like they've just ignored it, and it's just allowed. And so that's my biggest thing about hardcore that I still hate, is the fact that like there are people I know who are still friends with Sweet Pete, and it's like, what, like, how are you still friends with him after, like, there was a running joke when I first moved to Boston that I had, like, somebody was like, oh, Sweet Pete's taking you to a show. And I was like, yeah, he's, just giving me a ride to a show. I didn't know that much about him. And they were like, oh, you don't need to worry, you're over 18. Like that was like talked about as a joke. And it was okay, So I don't know. I'm sorry I'm ranting now, but
No. It's interesting. There was a specific time. I mean, I'm sure it happens now, but like there was definitely a time in a very specific subset of hardcore that I feel like kind of had that, like there were older dudes who had such a huge Peter Pan complex.
Yes.
That
yep.
they they didn't want to stop dating, young women in ways that, probably created power dynamics that weren't necessarily healthy.
For sure. And I do think it's stopped. In ways, which I think is good. Like I do think the scene has grown a lot in that way with at least how women are treated. I've seen a big difference in that. So.
Well, and I think there's more diversity now.
Oh, for sure.
I can tell, which is, it's crazy the amount of diversity compared to when. I started going to shows in the early
Yeah.
90s, you know.
Yeah, but it's like so interesting to me how many fests and how many labels, you know, still just have men, you know, like
Mhm.
there's one label out of Boston that like just after like 10 years of being a label just signed a band with a woman in it. Like it's literally been all guys. Or the fact that like I'll see a lineup for a fest, like I saw this like before COVID happened, a fest that was happening in New Jersey, and every single band was all men. And I was actually talking to my partner Joey about it, and he was like, well, maybe part of the problem is that guys aren't expanding who they're friends with. And they're not, you know, like they're starting a band with their friends who are all men. But maybe part of it is that guys need to like expand who they're friends with. And we need to figure out how to diversify our own friendship circles. Women need to do it too, you know, like it's
Mhm.
just, but like as a woman in hardcore, the majority of my friends are men.
Well,
So
Mike Pence told me I'm not allowed to be friends with a woman.
yeah, I mean, there's probably some guys in the hardcore scene who would agree with that too, but so I think that that's part of it is like, you know, I think men need to expand like outside of their friend circle when they start a band and be like, hey, maybe we could get some more perspectives in this band. Um and find somebody that's not like a cis man to be in their band. So I do think that the scene in general has gotten more diverse. It
Mhm.
still shows like bands and labels and fests and all of that are still very male dominated.
It's absolutely true. I mean, I run a label that actively tries to find,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
people of different backgrounds in bands, and you know, it's finding bands sometimes is hard because
Yeah.
even it's like it's become a you know, when there's a female fronted band,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes, you know, certain labels will just sign it as like, oh hey,
Yep.
look, as a show off piece,
Yep.
and and then you're like, well, the label that's actually trying to find, you know, these bands is like they are left in the wayside, you know, so
Yes.
it's sometimes tough.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's part of what I want to do is open the door to make that
Yeah.
the norm where, you know, the you know, bands don't look like four guys in the same frat, but you know,
Yeah.
like four random people in your high school yearbook, you know,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
picked out of a hat.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I appreciate that. And that's something you and I have talked about, you know, like when you've talked about wanting to sign bands, and Bert at Safe Inside is the same way, you know, it's like trying to find bands that are more diverse to sign, because that's like what we should be, that's like what should be getting out to people is you know, we talk about this in teaching a lot. Because I'm a educator, a public school educator, about trying to diversify, you know, what we're teaching children so that it actually reflects who they are. And I feel like the same should be happening within the hardcore scene. Like what people are exposed to at shows and the bands that they listen to should also represent who they are. And whether, you know, as a woman, I'm in the minority, there should still be plenty of females in bands that I can look at and connect with.
Yeah, I mean, personally, my the friend I've had the longest in my life,
Mm-hmm.
I met her on the bus on the way to a show in Chicago.
Nice. Nice.
And when I was like 18 years old, and we're still friends to this day. And, you know, it's for me, going to hardcore shows was just, you know, just meeting cool people
Yeah.
regardless of who they
Mhm.
were,
Yep.
their social capital,
Yep.
their, uh, you know, their background. It was, you know, it was just, she's my friend, and
Yeah.
we've been friends through thick and thin, for, I don't even want to say how long now. God, too long. Look, I'm too old now. Like, that's the math there is like, my ears are smoking, but yeah. So it's it's I think people are missing out if
Yeah.
if you keep it so narrow.
Oh, so true. That is so true. Yeah, like that goes back to that whole like thinking critically piece, right? Like when we diversify the people we're friends with, whether it be gender, sexual orientation, or race or ethnicity, like we're going to learn how to think critically better and how to actually be able to look at things and see the gray area instead of be so black and white when like if all all of my friends are all white women, like that's all I'm going to know. But if I'm diversifying who I'm friends with, I'm making my life so much better by learning more about other people and not just white women.
So you're an educator.
Yes.
Do your students know what you do in your spare time?
Well, no, not currently. So when I lived in Colorado, my students found out I was in a band. I'm friends with a lot of like parents of former students on social media. And so I post about my band and stuff on Instagram and Facebook when I had Facebook. And so they all knew about it, but currently where I work, no, because I eventually want to be an administrator. And while I love hardcore and what I do in the hardcore scene, I don't want that to possibly be a hindrance on being looked at professionally. So I keep my personal life very personal within my school district.
Yeah, I get that. I'm in my day job, I am a medical professional and in upper management. So it's I I don't bring any of this stuff
Yeah.
up, and I don't add people from work on social media.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's funny, you just like, it's like a double life where you're not
Yeah.
hiding it actively, but
Right.
you're not bringing it up.
Yeah. Yeah. But like what drives me in hardcore is, are my political views and social justice. And that's also what drives me in education. So I have that connection there. And I do have to say, like, I am really grateful for hardcore and punk because I do feel like being friends with so many people in the hardcore and punk community, like on social media, allows me to learn even more about what's happening politically across the world. I mean, I listen to, a New York Times podcast every day, an NPR podcast every day, and like read the New York Times. And like I try to stay like up to date on things, but like also having those personal connections with people who live in different places across the world. I do think that helps me to understand more, and that allows me to, integrate social justice into the education that I provide, because that's why I am an educator.
I mean, that's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, we it's good to hear when folks teach for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I got into education, was that I wanted to help kids learn how to see the gray area and how to be compassionate people, and like they are at that young age, and I don't want them to lose that. And if I can be somebody who can help them see that the things they care about, because kids do care about so much at a young age, are important, you know, I want to help with that. So yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the record.
Okay.
So you know, how did the deal with Safe Inside come about? You know, because you guys had, I think, had done an EP before that, or split? Was it a split?
So we did a 7-inch first, an EP on Convulse Records, which is like doing amazing now. He just announced like he's putting out the new Cell Rot. If you haven't heard Cell Rot, I highly recommend them. They're from the Bay Area and they're amazing. And it was his first, our friend Adam, it was his first release. And we just toured on it a bunch. And then we did this split 7-inch with a label in the UK that I can't remember the name of, and I'm so sorry. With Lift and Discourage. Discourage are like some of our really good friends from the Bay Area, like just really great, straightforward hardcore. And then Lift is like Snapcase, like amazing hardcore from Connecticut, like just so good. They're so good. And Safe Inside, Bert heard about us through, I think, a couple different people, and reached out to us about wanting to put out our record, and was just really like passionate about us as a band and what we stood for, and just like we have very similar values and like things that we care about within hardcore. And I could just tell he was really genuine about wanting to put us out. And so we sat on that thought for a while until we decided what we were going to do, because we were like planning our European tour and like knew that after Europe we were going to take like a short break, because we had just been touring like whenever we could for a couple of years, which like isn't a ton of touring compared to like other bands, but for a bunch of working professionals, like all of our vacation was spent touring. And then we decided to go with Safe Inside because Bert was just so awesome about everything. And yeah, he's wonderful. It's been really great working with him, and we've got a couple other things in the works too, and he's just been so supportive.
Yeah, it's funny. Before I had met you online, we'd spoken. Like when I knew I wanted to do this new label, I was going through. I'm like, all right, well, what bands are out there? You know, who would I want to look at? And your band, I heard it, and I was like, oh man, like this is the band. Like this is the band. This is amazing.
Aw,
And
thanks.
and then boom, was like the announcement came, and I was like, well, that's some timing right there. I'm like, but you know, kudos, that's awesome.
Thanks.
You know, I was really blown away when I first heard you guys.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thanks so much.
The label was Speedo Wax Records, by the way. I just looked it up.
Thank you. Speedo Wax. That's it. Yeah. That 7-inch just like went real quick. But I mean, it is 3 bands that are like kind of different. So yeah.
So the artwork on the Hollow Hope record is interesting. What was the idea behind that?
Yeah. So we are not the best at design. Like we really suck at design. Like, I mean, our first 7-inch is like literally a photograph our guitar player took out a window of a car. Like it's very like, it just looks really poorly done because we just are not creative. Like there's 5 of us and none of us are good at being creative. But for, I think just through conversation, we went through like a couple of different ideas about the record, and we kind of settled on this idea of having somebody in a balaclava, which has been done before. Like we're very aware of that. Like Left 4 Dead, like we pretty much like ripped off a Left 4 Dead idea, which is fine. But we decided we wanted it to be a kid. So it's our friend's son, Ian, because of this idea of like how politics like affect the youth so much, right? Like how all of the choices and the things we do are really affect like what the future is going to be like for young people. And so that was kind of where it came from, was this idea that we put children in this like this vulnerable and slightly dangerous position when it comes to how we've handled politics. And so that's where that came from. It was just super simple. But we decided from that to do like a photo shoot of various people within the Denver hardcore and punk scene, because it is a really diverse scene of people, and it is young and it is political. And so we wanted to like include a whole bunch of people in it, because that's like really what the record is written for, is like it's I don't know how I'm gonna say this well. It's like meant to be like a community type record. Like it's something that's meant to be where like everybody can relate to it in some way or another, and feel really connected to it. So that was kind of why we wanted to include a whole bunch of people in it as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I might be talking out my butt right now. I don't know.
So you have a podcast as well.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and on your podcast, you only have female guests. What was the thought process behind that, and the kind of the reaction now that you guys are 6-7 episodes in?
Yeah, we have 7 episodes right now. We took a hiatus partly because of what I told you at the beginning of the episode. I was going through all of that, and then my partner on the podcast, she has some family stuff that's going on, but I think we're recording a new episode this Sunday, so it should be back soon. We just went gung-ho to start, and it was kind of crazy. The podcast partly came out, so it's called Double Dare Ya, after the Bikini Kill song. It partly came out of feeling like I needed a creative outlet during COVID, because like we weren't able to play shows or anything, and partly from having so many conversations with women about what it's like to be a woman in the hardcore scene. And so the show isn't specifically meant to be just cis women. We're trying to make sure that we're trying to diversify and meet other people. Like we've had gender neutral people on the show. We would definitely have trans women on the show. So we're definitely like trying to diversify. We just like have a kind of a long list of people we want to interview, which is really great. But the point of doing the show was that I feel like there are a lot of podcasts out there related to hardcore that are run by men, and that typically only have men as guests, or they have like a woman every once in a while. And like, I hate to say it, but there's like a hand-picked group of women like within the scene who are like cool, and are often put on a lot of podcasts, which is fine because they are cool, but like there's more of us than that. But it was this idea that like I wanted to create something that like I would want to listen to because I could relate to it and connect to it. And so that's where it kind of came from, was this idea of having women on who are not just part of the hardcore community, but are also doing like really rad things with their lives that are like trying to make the world a better place. And so, you know, we've had guests on. My friend Kimberly was on, and she like was huge in Boston punk and hardcore, ran the Democracy Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Like if you're from Boston and you don't know Kimberly, you should. And she also does a ton of prison abolition work. You know, we had our friend Emily on, who's originally from Australia, but lives in the UK now, like grew up going to hardcore shows. And she like works for a nonprofit and like does refugee work and like all of this kind of stuff. So like, we're just trying to show that like, there are a lot of really amazing women within the hardcore and punk scene, but also that like women can find something that they can relate to. Because again, you know, like there are some really great like hardcore podcasts out there, but like the majority of the time I can't relate to it. And like I've gotten to the point where I'm like really bitter about it, but I think I have a right to be. And I've thought about this a lot where I'm like, well, am I just being like an annoying woman by complaining? And it's like, no, I think I have a right to be upset about the fact that like I can look through somebody's Instagram podcast to see who all of their guests have been. And like it takes me how long to get to there being a woman on the episode? Like I don't want to just hear men talk about hardcore. Because honestly, a lot of the perspectives that men have about hardcore, I don't have. I have very different perspectives on it. So that was it. Was like, I want women to be able to be like, oh, here's something that I can relate to. And look at these awesome women and the things they're doing outside of hardcore, because hardcore is not life.
Yeah, it's I think one of my favorite aspects is, you know, you meet people through hardcore, and you bond over music you listen to. But my closest friendships have been with people that we talk more about things outside of music than music.
Yes.
And in fact, my closest friends I've met through hardcore, I would probably say most of the time we have differences of opinion as far as music goes. And I'm just going to point this out is my good friend Rich here. We've been friends for what, 20 some years, Rich?
20 plus years,
and yeah. Rich has not heard either of the two latest Taylor Swift records.
Oh my God, Rich! Rich!
I don't really like pop music.
Oh God, it's so good. And I gotta tell you, I was not like into pop music. And then last year, for some reason, and I've always liked Taylor Swift. But last year, I don't know. I just like had hit this point where I'm like, I'm not even going to listen to men make music. I'm only going to find female artists. And like, so I started listening to a lot of pop music. Like part of it was like that Lizzo record is so good. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I can relate to it. And then like the new Halsey is really good. But Taylor Swift, like, she's so good. She's so good. And like her songs are so relatable if you've ever been through heartbreak or love or anything like that. And like these two last records she put out are like so sad. And she made them with the dude from The National, which is super cool. So she's like expanding like her music circle in a way, which is really neat. So they're not super poppy records. They're actually, I mean, I think they're like a little more folk-like. So you should check them out, Rich.
I just love that they're like almost mini concept records. In a way.
Yep, they are. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like several songs that tie together, like, you know, from different people's perspectives from different points in time. You know, it's just cool. So like Betty and August and Cardigan, all three from the three people involved from different time periods. And it's funny. My wife was like, I don't think that's true. And I'm like, so I'm like Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with Crazy. And I'm like, look at the lyrics and here's the...
Oh, Jesus.
It's funny. I'm not into pop music really either, but you know, there's certain pop artists and I mean, coincidentally, they're almost always female.
Yeah.
Like I'm a big fan of a Canadian pop star, Lights.
Okay.
And it's and a Canadian like alt country singer named Lindy Ortega.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know who Lindy Ortega is.
And so like I'm not a huge pop person, but
Yeah.
you know, I've really probably the last couple of years really dug into certain aspects of pop.
Yeah.
It's like a palate cleanser for hardcore.
Yeah.
It's so weird. I mean, I'm just at this point becoming increasingly aware of like kind of being like a square white dude with left leaning politics. Like I pretty much like, I mean, as far as like current music, it's almost exclusively hardcore with a little bit of metal.
Wow.
Sometimes a little bit of hip hop comes in. But like, well, like, so I'm friends with Bob and Pat who do Axe to Grind, and they, it's amazing to me how much pop music Bob listens to.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I listen to the shit I grew up on. Like, I grew up in a household where there was a lot of like kind of 70s hard rock type of stuff being played. So I listened to a lot of that. But like, as far as like, yeah, I mean, I have a hard enough time keeping up with what's current in punk and hardcore without like bringing other things into the mix sometimes.
Yeah, that's so funny because I feel like I'm definitely have moved towards listening to pop and indie more, and like pretty much exclusively female artists. Like everybody who knows me knows my obsession with Phoebe Bridgers, but like everybody should be obsessed with Phoebe Bridgers. And like the newest Julian Baker record is probably going to be my record of 2021. I
haven't spun it yet. I just got it in the mail like a week or two ago, and I haven't had a chance to spin it yet.
Oh my God. Like Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers was like the 2020 album, like super sad. Like you could connect to it so well. And then you put on that Julian Baker record and it's like, oh man, she stepped it up. Like she stepped it up so hard. Like it is so sad. So sad. And relatable. And so I have like little sprinklings of hardcore and punk within that now. And I think it's just, again, it's like, I want to find stuff I can relate to.
Well, I mean, I read a bits of a study that was from, I don't know how many years ago, but it was, it talked about how no matter like whatever music that you listen to during your most formative time, at some point in your life, you will always go back to that.
Yeah.
You revert back to it. And, I'm not Freddie Madball. I didn't start listening to hardcore when I was 3.
Right.
So, I listened, I grew up in an area where what was on the radio was what was available. And so it was, I revert back to some pop, but it's the quality and of the pop and, the frame of reference I look at it now is framed by a lot of the music I've listened to since I was younger.
Yeah.
So it's, growing up, going from punk into hardcore, just so many cool, like, like female fronted bands that just sort of like opened my eyes, like, oh, there's some cool shit out there, so it's framed the what type of pop music I listen to.
That makes sense.
And then our common friend Jeff, for some reason, has just decided Def Leppard's the best band to ever exist again.
Oh God! Oh no!
Like Jeff, I love Jeff to death, but he literally over the last few years has just gone right deep dive into Def Leppard and follows them on tour.
Yeah,
he uses his like vacation time and is all of his free money. He won an NCAA basketball pool a couple of years ago and won a bunch of money and used it to go out to Vegas. And I'm like, man,
I mean, whatever makes you happy, right? I guess.
He isn't posting on Instagram much anymore, but as like he would be like, "Oh, I'm going to Muskegon to see Warrant and
Oh
I
my
don't know,
god.
Foreigner or something at some like casino." Like that
Wow.
was his
Well,
life.
I picked him up, and he doesn't drive. And I picked him up, and we drove out to Naperville, Illinois, to go see Cheap Trick play outside in the rain.
Wow.
That's cool.
Wow.
Though. I don't know. I
And
love Cheap
I'm not gonna lie, Cheap Trick was awesome.
That's cool. I've been to Naperville once, and it was with my sister when I was in high school because the Arrivals used to live in a house in Naperville, and we went there to hang out. If you know the Arrivals, they're like super important Chicago punk band.
I don't know them.
No clue.
Oh, you should check them out.
I would go to Naperville when I was in college because I had friends in a band called Super Sleuth.
Oh
And-
yeah. I know Super Sleuth.
and I didn't drive, so I would take the train, and they would pick me up from the train station, and then like they would drop me off after shows and stuff at the train station. On like
Okay.
I carried the schedule. It was pre-internet on your phone.
Yeah.
I didn't have a phone. So I would have the printed train schedule in my backpack with sewn on patches. I'd be like, oh, the trains, I got to be at the train at 11:52.
That's awesome.
So I will probably give you some time back here, but a couple more things is one,
Yeah.
what band should listeners check out that maybe not on their radar? The cat seal of approval here. What's a band everyone should be checking out?
I said them both earlier, but Move and Zulu, 100%.
Zulu's so good.
Political,
good,
super political, like just fantastic bands that like I just listened to that Move today, and it was just lyrically so good. Just so good. Where I was like, why do I do this? Like I should just stop making hardcore music because this is all anybody needs to listen to. Like who cares what I have to say? Like that's how it made me feel, which I feel like is a really great thing. So they're both I think I'm not sure if the Zulu is self-released, but the Move did come out on Triple B. They're both on Spotify though, so you can at least check them out there to start.
Yeah, Zulu. Yeah, Zulu was like the soundtrack to, late in the summer, taking my dog for a walk every night, and like that was the soundtrack like, every night for I don't know how many weeks. So
nice. Good. Yeah. So that's those. I haven't been listening to a lot of hardcore, but I've been listening to those for sure. And what's interesting is like they're both kind of bands that aren't typically my style of music, but because lyrically they're just so good, it's something I can get into because the lyrics are so meaningful. Like I can feel like how important those lyrics are.
Rich, is there anything else you wanted to ask?
Nothing I could think of right now. No.
All right. Well, Kat, what would you like to plug here?
Oh gosh.
Plug away.
Sorry, sorry for ranting. No, I'm not going to apologize for ranting.
Never apologize. Never apologize.
I don't really have much. Check out Safe Inside, of course, but check out Convulse Records if you haven't. Our friend Adam's been putting out so much good stuff lately, and he rocks. And hey, make sure you don't take hardcore for granted. And like when shows start happening again, you should just like go to all of them because this has been a real shit year. Because the last show I went to was 1 year ago yesterday, and I saw Curl Up and Die. So at least it was an amazing last show before COVID.
Yeah, I was the night Chicago shut down. I was at Avail. People were inside the venue, and then they were just like, "No, we're not allowed."
No.
and nothing was playing a different show another side of town. I'm like, well, I'm like, I'll try to go to that. I'm like, but that's going to be shut down too. And I went home and I was like, nope, that didn't get shut down.
It
I was
happened.
like, yeah. And I was like, well, I
Yeah.
guess
Is
I'll
it?
see I'll see a show in a couple weeks. And then 52 weeks later, here I am.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy that like I keep thinking about how I was standing at this show in this room with like the singer of Curl Up and Die, like screaming into a microphone, like in people's faces, and just being like, oh, there could have been like COVID everywhere in that room. Like just the idea that like we are in such a different place than we were 52 weeks ago.
Well,
it has been a hell of a year.
Do either of you guys watch like shows now? And in the middle of the show, if people get too close to each other, you're like, whoa, where's your mask?
Yeah, all the time.
Absolutely.
All the time. I'll watch like a TV show and be like, why are they like hugging? Like what's going on? Yes.
Did you just drink after the same glass of this person?
Right? Yeah.
Oh.
Yes. Do that all the time.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And
thanks for having me.
And everybody go check out Hollow Hope from FAIM
on
Safe Inside, and check out Kat's podcast, Double Dare Ya, and that is on all of the wonderful podcast platforms. Had some really cool guests. I think I've listened to 4 or 5 of the episodes.
Thank you so much.
And there's some really cool guests on there. So yeah, definitely check that out. And
thanks.
Is there a track? We're going to play a track. From FAIM. Do you have a preference of songs?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. No, I mean, my favorite song is Hollow Hope. So you could play Hollow Hope. It's actually a Bush ripoff song. So everybody thinks it's a Modern Life is War ripoff, but we actually ripped off Cold Contagious by Bush. So everybody should listen to Bush too.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and we're gonna listen here to Hollow Hope. And thanks everybody for checking out this episode of Nothing Better to Do podcast. Please hit subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, TuneIn app, Google Play, Spotify. We're on everything. So hit subscribe. That's important, and share this podcast with your friends. That's how we grow the show. And we will be back with another episode very soon.
You're really good at this.
I do another podcast where we're at like 400 episodes. So it's kind of like, I say this, my daughter can recite things now because she just hears it because her room's right next door.
What's the other podcast about?
Chicago sports.
Ooh. Okay. I'm a Packers fan. No, I'm a traitor. My mom married a Wisconsin man, and I switched sides.
You know what? I could give you Seattle, even though we're going to steal Russell Wilson. I could give you Denver, even though you stole Vic Fangio.
Who's not done that great of a job.
Listen.
You also stole Jay Cutler, kind of. I mean, we didn't really want him anymore in Denver. So
he's a weird dude. I just read a thing about it.
He is weird.
People wanted a picture with him, and he told they had to out chug him in beer to get the pic. And I'm like,
he's such a bro.
He's so broy.
Yeah.
But that Packers, that's where I draw the line there.
I'm so sorry.
We're done.
I'm sorry. I am a Cubs fan. I should be a White Sox fan, being from Northwest Indiana, but I'm a Cubs fan. I also grew up loving the Bulls. I had a BJ Armstrong jersey. So just the Bears and the Blackhawks. Don't like the Blackhawks either.
So wait, do you like hockey, or do you just
So I didn't get into hockey growing up, right? Because they had that thing like where you couldn't watch hockey games on TV, right? And like so like I didn't get into hockey because like I didn't play hockey. Wasn't interested, couldn't watch it, so I didn't get into hockey. And then I moved to Boston and got taken to a Bruins game, and I got into hockey. And then I'm going to get back into hockey now that Seattle's going to have a team.
The
I
Kraken.
figured like that's right. Like the Kraken, that's such a great mascot. So I think I'm going to get into hockey.
I argue with my sports co-host, and because he thinks it's a stupid name. I'm like, that's
No.
an amazing name. Like, clearly you're not a Clash of the Titans fan.
Yeah, so part of the reason why it's called the Kraken is because there is this myth that there is a giant octopus, a giant kraken that lives under the Narrows Bridge in Tacoma. Like the octopus is the mascot of like the city of Tacoma. And so when they like put names out, of course everybody voted for Kraken because it's like this great local myth. So that's why they chose the Kraken, because it's actually based on like a local myth having to do with Puget Sound.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. You'll have your list of players soon.
Oh, I'm so
draft is
excited.
coming up. Yeah.
I'm so sorry to all the teams. It's such bullshit how they do that stuff, but it'll happen with basketball again too one day in Seattle, hopefully.
Yeah, when you guys lost the Supersonics. Wonk,
Oh my
wonk.
God, so wrong.
Wonk.
So wrong.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and
thank you for having me.
And yeah, we will be back with another episode in a very short order.
Cool.
And so thank you so much, and have a great
night. Sorry if I put my foot in my mouth a few times.
Question each and every